The morning sun was already hot when Maria stepped out of her apartment building. She had been awake since 5 in the morning, getting ready for another long day at work. The bags under her eyes told a story of too many sleepless nights and too much worry. Her twins, Lucy and Ben, were still sleeping when she quietly made them lunch for school. At 8 years old, they were old enough to get themselves ready and walk to school together. Maria hated leaving them alone, but she had no choice. The bills wouldn't pay themselves. 3 months ago, everything changed when the doctors found cancer in her body. The treatments were working, but they cost more money than she had ever seen. Even with insurance, the medical bills kept coming. Each envelope in the mail felt like another weight on her shoulders. Maria worked at Joe's Diner downtown. It wasn't glamorous work, but Joe was kind enough to let her work double shifts. She would serve breakfast to the early crowd, take a short break, then come back for the dinner rush. Some days she worked 14 hours straight. The other waitresses worried about her. They could see how thin she was getting, how she would sometimes grip the counter when she thought no one was looking. But Maria always smiled and said she was fine. She had to be fine. Her children needed her to be fine. At home that evening, Maria sat at their small kitchen table with the twins. The apartment was tiny, just 2 bedrooms and a living room that doubled as a dining room. The furniture was old but clean. Maria made sure everything was always clean, even when she was exhausted. Lucy was working on her math homework, her tongue sticking out in concentration. She was the more serious twin, always wanting to get everything perfect. Ben was supposed to be reading, but he kept making silly faces at his sister to make her laugh. "Mom, can you help me with this problem?" Lucy asked, pointing to her worksheet. Maria looked at the math problem. For a moment, the numbers seemed to blur together. She blinked hard and tried to focus. The room felt unusually warm. "Of course, sweetie," she said, moving her chair closer to Lucy's. "Let's see what we're working with here." As she leaned over to look at the homework, a strange feeling washed over her. It started as dizziness, like when you stand up too fast, but this was different. The edges of her vision started to go dark. "Mom?" Ben's voice sounded far away, even though he was sitting right next to her. Maria tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come. The kitchen table seemed to be moving, tilting to one side. She reached out to steady herself, but her hand felt heavy, like it was moving through water. The last thing she remembered was Lucy's face, her eyes wide with fear, calling her name. When Maria collapsed, it happened so fast that the twins didn't understand what was happening at first. One moment their mother was helping with homework. The next she was on the floor not moving. Lucy screamed. It was a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her, a sound of pure terror. She had never seen her mother like this before. Maria's eyes were closed and she wasn't responding to Lucy shaking her arm. Ben, though he was just as scared as his sister, remembered something their teacher had taught them during safety week at school. When someone is hurt and won't wake up, you call for help. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the phone. He had to try 3 times to dial the right numbers, 911. "One, what's your emergency?" The voice on the other end sounded calm and professional. "My mom fell down and she won't wake up," Ben said, his voice cracking. "I don't know what to do." "Okay, honey, I'm going to help you." "What's your name?" "Ben, and my sister Lucy is here too. Please, you have to help our mom." The dispatcher's name was Jennifer, and she had been taking emergency calls for 15 years. She had talked to scared children before, but something about Ben's voice broke her heart. She could hear Lucy crying in the background. "Ben, you're being very brave. I'm sending an ambulance to help your mom right now. Can you tell me your address?" Ben rattled off their address. He was proud that he had memorized it, just like his mother had taught him. "Good job, Ben. Now, is your mom breathing?" Ben looked at his mother's chest. He could see it moving up and down just barely. "Yes, I think so. That's very good. I want you to stay on the phone with me until the ambulance gets there, okay? You're doing everything right." While Ben stayed on the phone, Lucy knelt beside their mother. She took Maria's hand in both of hers. It felt cold and limp, nothing like the warm, strong hands that braided her hair every morning. "Mom, please wake up," Lucy whispered. "We need you. I promise I'll be good. I'll do all my homework without complaining. Just please wake up." The minutes felt like hours. Ben kept asking Jennifer when the ambulance would arrive. Lucy kept talking to their mother, telling her about their day at school, about the drawing she had made in art class, about anything she could think of. Finally, they heard sirens in the distance. The sound got louder and louder until it was right outside their building. Heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway, and then someone was knocking on their door. "Paramedics," a voice called out. Ben ran to unlock the door. 2 paramedics rushed in, carrying big bags of medical equipment. Behind them came Mrs. Chen, their neighbor from across the hall. She must have heard Lucy screaming and called to see if everything was okay. The paramedics immediately went to work on Maria. They checked her pulse, her breathing, and her blood pressure. They asked the twins quick questions about what happened, when their mother had last eaten, if she had been sick. Lucy and Ben answered as best they could, but they realized they didn't know much about their mother's daily life. They didn't know she had been skipping meals to make sure they had enough food. They didn't know she sometimes felt dizzy at work but never told anyone. One of the paramedics, a kind woman named Rosa, knelt down to talk to the twins while her partner worked on Maria. "Your mom is very sick, but we're going to take her to the hospital where the doctors can help her," Rosa explained. "You two probably saved her life by calling for help so quickly." Mrs. Chen stepped forward. She was an older woman who had always been nice to the family, sometimes bringing them homemade cookies or offering to watch the twins if Maria needed to run errands. "I'll drive the children to the hospital," she told the paramedics. "They shouldn't be alone right now." As the paramedics carefully moved Maria onto a stretcher, Lucy grabbed her mother's hand one more time. "We'll be right behind you, Mom," she whispered. "Don't worry about us. Just get better." The apartment suddenly felt very empty and quiet after everyone left. Mrs. Chen helped the twins gather some things they might need, like their jackets and Lucy's stuffed animal that she had slept with since she was a baby. As they walked to Mrs. Chen's car, Ben looked back at their building. Everything looked the same as it always did, but somehow everything felt different. He had a feeling that after today, nothing would ever be quite the same again. Neither twin could have imagined that this terrible day would lead to something wonderful. They couldn't know that their quick thinking and brave actions would soon catch the attention of someone very special, someone who would change their lives in ways they never could have dreamed. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and fear. Lucy and Ben sat in chairs that were too big for them, their legs swinging nervously. Mrs. Chen had bought them sandwiches from the cafeteria, but neither child had much appetite. It had been 4 hours since the ambulance brought their mother to the emergency room. 4 hours of waiting, wondering, and worrying. The twins had never been in a hospital before, and everything about it felt scary and unfamiliar. Dr. Williams finally came out to talk to them. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He sat down so he would be at the same level as the children. "Your mother is very sick," he said gently. "She hasn't been eating enough food or getting enough rest. Her body was so tired that it just couldn't keep going anymore." Lucy felt tears starting again. "Is she going to die?" "No, sweetheart. We're going to take very good care of her, but she needs to stay in the hospital for a while so we can help her get stronger." Ben had been quiet for most of the day, but now he spoke up. "It's my fault, isn't it? I should have noticed she was sick." Dr. Williams shook his head firmly. "This is absolutely not your fault, son. Your mother has been working very hard to take care of you both. Sometimes adults try so hard to be strong that they forget to take care of themselves. You did exactly the right thing by calling for help." A social worker named Janet arrived shortly after the doctor left. She was a woman in her 40s with a warm smile, but the twins could tell she was there to talk about serious things. "I know this is a difficult time," Janet said, sitting down with them. "While your mother is getting better, we need to figure out where you'll stay. Do you have any family nearby?" The twins looked at each other. They had never met their grandparents. Their father had left when they were babies, and their mother never talked about him. They had some aunts and uncles, but they lived far away and hadn't spoken to their mother in years. "There's no one," Lucy said quietly. Janet nodded understandingly. "That's okay. We have wonderful families who help children in situations like this. They're called foster families, and they would take good care of you until your mother is well enough to come home." "Together?" Ben asked quickly. "We want to stay together." "I'm going to do my best to keep you together," Janet promised. "But sometimes it's hard to find families who can take 2 children at once." The thought of being separated was more terrifying to the twins than anything else that had happened that day. They had never spent a night apart in their entire lives. As the evening wore on, more people began to take notice of their story. A nurse named Patricia had been checking on them throughout the day. She was touched by how the twins looked after each other, how Lucy would share her crackers with Ben, how Ben would pat his sister's back when she cried. Patricia mentioned their situation to her husband when she called him during her break. He told his coworker, who told his wife, who happened to work at the local television station. By 9 o'clock that night, a news crew had arrived at the hospital. The reporter, a young woman named Ashley, approached Mrs. Chen to ask if she could speak with the family about what had happened. "These children showed incredible bravery today," Ashley explained. "Stories like this remind people that there are heroes in everyday life. Would it be okay if we talked to them?" Mrs. Chen looked at Lucy and Ben. They were exhausted, but she thought it might be good for them to have something to focus on besides their worry. "Only if they want to," she said. The twins agreed. Though they felt nervous about being on television, Ashley was very gentle with them, asking simple questions about what happened and how they had known to call for help. "We learned about emergencies at school," Ben explained to the camera. "Our teacher said that if someone is hurt and won't wake up, you should call 911 and stay calm. My mom always tells us to look out for each other," Lucy added. "So when Ben called for help, I stayed with Mom to make sure she was okay." Ashley asked them about their mother, and both children's faces lit up despite their worry. "She's the best mom in the world," Lucy said. "She works really hard so we can have everything we need. She makes the best pancakes and she helps us with our homework every night. She always tells us bedtime stories," Ben added. "She makes them up herself about brave knights and magical princesses. She says everyone can be a hero if they're kind and brave." The news segment was only 3 minutes long, but it captured something special about the twins and their love for their mother. It showed their small apartment, their mother's workplace at the diner, and ended with the children sitting in the hospital waiting room, holding hands. When the story aired on the 10 o'clock news, it immediately caught people's attention. The local news station's phone began ringing with calls from viewers who wanted to help the family. Some people offered to bring food to the hospital. Others asked how they could help pay for medical bills, but the twins knew nothing about any of this. They were focused on one thing: seeing their mother. Dr. Williams finally said they could visit her, but only for a few minutes. Maria was awake but very weak. She was connected to machines that beeped softly, monitoring her heart rate and other vital signs. When the twins walked into her room, Maria started crying, not from sadness but from relief and love and pride all mixed together. "My brave babies," she whispered, her voice scratchy from being so dehydrated. "I'm so proud of you both." Lucy and Ben carefully climbed onto the bed, one on each side of their mother. They had so many things they wanted to say, but mostly they just wanted to be close to her. "We were so scared," Lucy admitted. "I know, baby. I was scared too. But you two were so smart and so brave. You probably saved my life." Ben looked at all the machines and tubes. "Do you hurt?" "A little," Maria said honestly. "But I'm going to get better. The doctors are taking very good care of me." They talked quietly for a few more minutes before a nurse said the children needed to let their mother rest. Saying goodbye was hard, even though they knew they would see her again tomorrow. Back in the waiting room, Janet had news about their living situation. She had found a foster family who could take both twins, at least temporarily. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez lived about 20 minutes away and had experience caring for children in emergency situations. "They seem very nice," Janet said. "They have a guest room with 2 beds and they said you can visit your mother every day." The twins felt nervous about staying with strangers, but they were relieved they wouldn't be separated. Mrs. Chen offered to drive them to the Rodriguez house and make sure they got settled in okay. As they gathered their few belongings, Ben found himself thinking about the phone call to 911. He had been so scared, but somehow he had remembered what to do. He thought about what his mother had said about being brave and kind. Lucy was thinking about her mother's pale face and how small she had looked in the hospital bed. She promised herself that when her mother came home, she would help more around the house. She would notice if her mother wasn't feeling well. Neither twin could sleep much that first night in the unfamiliar house. Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez were kind people who tried to make them feel welcome, but everything felt strange and temporary. What the children didn't know was that 3 states away, someone very important had just finished watching their story on the national news, someone who understood exactly what they were going through, because he had lived through something very similar. When he was their age, someone who had the power to change their entire future was already making phone calls and asking questions about the brave twins who had saved their mother's life. 3,000 miles away, in a glass tower overlooking the city skyline, David Park was having a very different kind of evening. He sat in his corner office on the 42nd floor, reviewing reports from his technology company. At 35 years old, he was one of the youngest billionaires in the country. The office was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Awards and magazine covers featuring David lined the walls. Everything about the space screamed success. But David felt restless that night. He had been working late again, trying to finalize a deal that would make his company even more valuable. The numbers were important, but lately, they hadn't felt meaningful. His assistant had left hours ago, along with most of the building's other workers. David often stayed late not because he had to, but because he didn't know what else to do with himself. His penthouse apartment was beautiful but empty. He had acquaintances but few real friends. Around 10 o'clock, David decided to take a break. He walked to the break room to make coffee and turned on the small television that hung in the corner. He rarely watched TV, but sometimes the background noise helped him think. The local news was ending, but as he waited for his coffee to brew, a national news segment began. The anchor introduced a story about two brave children who had saved their mother's life. David almost changed the channel, but something made him pause. The footage showed two small children sitting in a hospital waiting room. The girl had dark hair and pigtails and was clutching a stuffed animal. The boy was trying to be brave, but David could see the fear in his eyes. As the reporter told their story, David found himself leaning against the counter, completely focused on the screen. The children's mother had collapsed from exhaustion and malnutrition. She had been working multiple jobs to pay for cancer treatments, often going without food to make sure her children had enough to eat. When the twins spoke to the reporter, their love for their mother was obvious. They weren't angry about their situation or asking for pity. They just wanted their mother to get better. Something about the boy reminded David of himself at that age. The way he kept looking at his sister protectively. The way he tried to sound grown up when he talked about calling 911. The determination in his voice when he said they wanted to stay together. David's own childhood came flooding back to him. He had been 9 years old when his mother collapsed at work. She had been cleaning office buildings at night and working at a factory during the day, trying to support David and his younger sister after their father abandoned them. That night, 30 years ago, had changed everything for David's family. His mother had been hospitalized for weeks. David and his sister had been placed with relatives who didn't really want them. The fear, the uncertainty, the feeling of being powerless to help the person you loved most in the world, it all came rushing back. David remembered sitting in a hospital waiting room just like the one on the television. He remembered the smell of disinfectant and the uncomfortable plastic chairs. He remembered how the adults spoke about him and his sister like they weren't there, deciding their future without asking what they wanted. Most of all, he remembered the kindness of a few strangers who had helped when no one else would. A nurse who bought him and his sister sandwiches when they had no money. A doctor who spent extra time explaining their mother's condition in words they could understand. A social worker who fought to keep them together when others wanted to split them up. Those small acts of kindness had meant everything to a scared little boy. They had taught him that there were good people in the world. People who would help just because it was the right thing to do. Now, watching these twins face the same situation he had lived through, David felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He felt connected to something bigger than himself. The news segment ended, but David couldn't stop thinking about it. He turned off the television and walked back to his office, but the reports on his desk suddenly seemed unimportant. Instead, he opened his laptop and searched for more information about the story. He found the local news station's website and watched the full interview with the children. He read articles about their mother's situation and the community's response to their story. What he learned made him even more determined to help. Maria, their mother, was a good person who had simply been dealt a difficult hand. She had no family support and very few resources, but she had raised two remarkable children who showed courage and love in the face of crisis. David thought about his own mother, who had passed away 5 years earlier. She had lived to see his success, had been proud of everything he had accomplished. but she had never forgotten their humble beginnings. She often reminded David that he had a responsibility to use his good fortune to help others. "Money is just a tool," she used to say. "What matters is how you use it to make the world better." David had donated millions to charities over the years, but it had always felt somewhat distant and impersonal. This was different. This was two children who reminded him of himself and his sister, facing the same fears and challenges he had once faced. He picked up his phone and called his personal assistant. Even though it was nearly midnight, "Jennifer, I need you to do something for me first thing in the morning," he said when she answered. Jennifer had worked for David for 8 years and was used to his unusual requests, but she could hear something different in his voice tonight. "Of course, Mr. Park, what do you need?" "There's a family in Pennsylvania, a mother and 2 children. I want you to find out everything you can about their situation, medical bills, living situation, everything, and I want you to contact the hospital where the mother is being treated." David explained what he had seen on the news and what he wanted to do. Jennifer took careful notes, asking questions about logistics and legal considerations. "Sir, if I may ask," Jennifer said carefully, "this is quite different from your usual charitable activities. Is there a particular reason this family has caught your attention?" David was quiet for a moment. He rarely talked about his childhood even with people he trusted. "Let's just say I understand what those children are going through," he said finally, "and I'm in a position to help in a way that I wish someone could have helped my family when I was their age." After he hung up, David stood by his office window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow, he would learn everything he could about Maria and her twins. He would figure out how to help them without making them feel like charity cases. He thought about the boy, Ben, trying to sound brave on television. He thought about the girl, Lucy, talking about her mother's bedtime stories. These were good kids who deserved a chance at a better life. David had built his fortune by making smart decisions and taking calculated risks. But this wasn't about business. This was about remembering what it felt like to be scared and powerless, and using his resources to make sure these children never had to feel that way again. As he finally prepared to leave the office, David made a decision that would change not only the twins' lives, but his own as well. He was going to Pennsylvania to meet them in person. For the first time in months, David felt truly excited about something. He felt like he was about to do the most important work of his life, and it had nothing to do with technology or profit margins. He was about to become the kind of person who had helped him and his sister all those years ago. He was about to become someone's guardian angel, just when they needed one most. David's private jet touched down at the small regional airport just after 9 in the morning. He had barely slept during the flight, spending most of the time reading the detailed report Jennifer had prepared about the Martinez family. The information was heartbreaking, but not surprising. Maria owed over $200,000 in medical bills. Their landlord had started eviction proceedings. The diner where she worked had no health insurance benefits, and her cancer treatments had depleted what little savings they had. But David also learned inspiring details about the family. Lucy and Ben were both excellent students despite their circumstances. Their teachers described them as kind, responsible children who looked out for classmates who were having difficulties. Maria volunteered at their school whenever she could, helping with reading programs and school events. These weren't people looking for handouts. They were a family that had been knocked down by circumstances beyond their control. David had dressed carefully for this trip. Instead of his usual expensive suits, he wore jeans and a simple gray sweater. He wanted to blend in, to approach this situation as a regular person rather than a wealthy businessman. His first stop was the hospital. David had learned that Maria was being moved out of intensive care that morning, which was good news. The twins would be visiting her after school. At the hospital information desk, David introduced himself simply as someone who had heard about the family's situation and wanted to help. The receptionist directed him to the 3rd floor where Maria's room was located. David took the elevator up, feeling more nervous than he had in years. He had given speeches to thousands of people, negotiated deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, but the thought of walking into that hospital room made his hands shake slightly. Through the window, he could see Maria sitting up in bed, looking much better than she had in the news footage. She was still pale and thin, but her eyes were alert. She was reading a book, probably trying to pass the time until her children arrived. David knocked gently on the door frame. "Excuse me, Mrs. Martinez. My name is David. I wondered if I could speak with you for a few minutes." Maria looked up, surprised. She wasn't expecting any visitors besides the twins. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "No, ma'am, we don't. But I saw your children on the news and I wanted to see if there was anything I could do to help your family." Maria's expression became guarded. Over the past few days, several reporters and curious strangers had tried to visit. Some seemed genuine, but others just wanted to gawk at their situation. "That's very kind of you," she said carefully, "but we're managing fine." David could see the pride in her eyes. The same pride his own mother had shown when social workers and well-meaning neighbors had offered help. He understood that accepting charity felt like admitting failure, even when it absolutely wasn't. "Mrs. Martinez, may I tell you a story?" David asked. "When I was 9 years old, my mother collapsed at work. She had been working 2 jobs to support my sister and me after our father left. I remember sitting in a hospital waiting room just like this one, scared and confused." Maria's expression softened slightly. She could hear something personal in David's voice. "What happened?" she asked. "Strangers helped us," David said simply. "A doctor who took time to explain things to me and my sister. A nurse who made sure we had food. A social worker who fought to keep us together. Small acts of kindness from people who didn't know us but cared anyway." David sat down in the chair beside her bed. "Those people didn't help us because they felt sorry for us. They helped because they recognized that sometimes good families just need a little support to get back on their feet." "Are you a social worker?" Maria asked. David smiled. "No, ma'am. I'm actually a businessman. I was lucky enough to be successful, and now I'm in a position to help other families the way mine was helped." Before Maria could ask more questions, they heard familiar voices in the hallway. Lucy and Ben were arriving with Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been picking them up from school and bringing them to visit. The twins rushed into the room, their faces lighting up when they saw their mother sitting up and looking better. They climbed carefully onto the bed, one on each side, chattering about their day at school. "Mom, guess what? Our teacher said the whole class saw us on TV," Lucy announced. "And some kids brought us cookies at lunch," Ben added. "Everyone's being really nice to us." Maria hugged them close, feeling overwhelmed by love and gratitude. Then she noticed they were looking curiously at David, who had stood up when they entered. "Kids, this is Mr. David. He came to visit because he heard about what happened." Lucy and Ben were polite but shy, the way children often are around adults they don't know. David knelt down so he was at their eye level. "I heard about how brave you both were when your mother got sick," he said. "You did exactly the right thing by calling for help." "Our teacher taught us about emergencies," Ben explained proudly. "And we always stick together," Lucy added. Taking her brother's hand, David felt his heart squeeze. These children reminded him so much of himself and his sister at that age. They had the same fierce loyalty to each other, the same maturity that came from facing grown-up problems too early. "I can see that you love each other very much," David said. "That's the most important thing any family can have." Mrs. Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, stepped forward. "I'm sorry, but visiting hours will be ending soon. The children need to get home for dinner." David stood up. "Of course, Mrs. Martinez, would it be all right if I came back tomorrow? I'd like to talk with you more about how I might be able to help." Maria hesitated. There was something different about this man compared to the other visitors she'd had. He seemed genuine, and the way he had talked about his own childhood felt authentic. "All right," she said finally. "But please understand we're not looking for charity." "I understand completely," David said. "I'm not talking about charity. I'm talking about one family helping another, the way families are supposed to help each other." As David prepared to leave, Ben tugged on his sweater. "Mr. David, are you going to help our mom get better?" David knelt down again, looking directly into the boy's serious brown eyes. "I'm going to do everything I can to help your whole family. Is that okay with you?" Ben nodded solemnly. "Thank you. We've been taking care of Mom, but it's hard sometimes." "You've been doing an amazing job," David said, "but you shouldn't have to do it alone." After saying goodbye, David walked slowly down the hospital corridor. He thought about Ben's words. "We've been taking care of Mom, but it's hard sometimes." An 8-year-old shouldn't have to worry about taking care of his parent, but David knew from experience that children in difficult situations often felt responsible for things beyond their control. That evening, David checked into a modest hotel near the hospital. He could have stayed at the luxury resort an hour away, but he wanted to be close to the family. He spent the evening making phone calls and planning. By the time he went to bed, David had made arrangements that would change everything for Maria and her twins. He had contacted the hospital's billing department, spoken with lawyers about setting up educational funds, and reached out to Maria's landlord about the eviction proceedings. Tomorrow, he would explain his plans to Maria. He expected her to resist at first. Pride was something he understood well, but he hoped she would eventually accept help for the sake of her children. David fell asleep thinking about Ben and Lucy, about their courage and their love for their mother. He thought about the scared 9-year-old boy he had once been, and how different his life might have been if someone like him had shown up at the right moment. Tomorrow, he would try to be for this family what he had wished someone could have been for his own family. 30 years ago, he would try to be their guardian angel, their unexpected blessing, their proof that sometimes help comes from the most surprising places. David returned to the hospital the next morning with a folder full of documents and a heart full of nervous energy. He had spent half the night rehearsing what he would say to Maria, trying to find the right words to explain his offer without making it sound like pity. When he knocked on Maria's door, she was sitting up in bed, looking much stronger than the day before. The color had returned to her cheeks and her eyes were brighter. "Good morning, Mrs. Martinez. How are you feeling today?" "Much better, thank you. The doctors say I can probably go home in a few days." She paused, studying his face. "You said yesterday that you wanted to help. What exactly did you have in mind?" David sat down in the visitor's chair, placing the folder on the small table beside him. "Before I explain, I want you to know something. Yesterday I told you about my childhood, about how strangers helped my family. What I didn't tell you is what happened after that." Maria listened intently as David shared more of his story. He told her about the scholarship that allowed him to go to college, about the mentor who helped him start his first business, about the series of opportunities that had led to his success. "Every step of the way, people invested in me when they had no reason to accept kindness," David said. "Not because they felt sorry for me, but because they saw potential and wanted to help it grow." "That's a beautiful story," Maria said softly. "But I still don't understand what this has to do with us." David opened the folder and pulled out a business card. Maria looked at it and gasped. She recognized the name from news articles and magazine covers. David Park, founder and CEO of TechFlow Industries, one of the youngest billionaires in America. "I don't understand," Maria said, staring at the card. "Why would someone like you care about our situation?" "Because Lucy and Ben remind me of my sister and me at their age. Because you remind me of my mother, working yourself to exhaustion to provide for your children. Because I have the power to help, and that means I have the responsibility to help." David pulled out a set of documents from the folder. "I've taken the liberty of looking into your situation. I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to understand exactly what you're facing." Maria felt a mix of emotions. Part of her was embarrassed that a stranger knew about their financial troubles. But part of her was also curious about what he had learned. "Your medical bills total just over $200,000, David said gently. "Your rent is 3 months behind and your landlord has started eviction proceedings. The diner where you work doesn't offer health insurance and you've been missing shifts because of treatments." Maria nodded, tears starting to form in her eyes. Hearing it all laid out like that made their situation sound hopeless. "But here's what else I learned," David continued. "Lucy and Ben are both in the gifted program at school. Their teachers say they're exceptional students who help other children with their schoolwork. You volunteer at their school despite working multiple jobs. Your coworkers at the diner describe you as the hardest worker they've ever seen." David leaned forward in his chair. "Mrs. Martinez, you're not failing. You're not asking for handouts. You're a good mother raising wonderful children under incredibly difficult circumstances. All you need is a chance to get back on your feet." Maria wiped her eyes with the tissue box David handed her. "What are you proposing?" "First, I'd like to take care of your medical bills. All of them, including any future treatments you might need." Maria shook her head immediately. "I can't accept that. It's too much." "Second," David continued gently, "I'd like to set up education funds for Lucy and Ben. College is expensive, and children as bright as yours deserve every opportunity to succeed. Mr. Park, this is incredibly generous, but I can't let you." "Third, I'd like to help you find a job with better benefits and more reasonable hours. I have connections with several companies in this area that are always looking for dedicated employees. Maria was quiet for a long moment, overwhelmed by the scope of David's offer. Why, she finally asked. Why would you do all this for strangers? David smiled, thinking of his own mother's words from years ago. Because money is just a tool. What matters is how you use it to make the world better. He pulled out one more document from the folder. This is a letter from the principal at Lucy and Ben's school. She heard about your situation and wanted you to know that both children have been selected for a special summer program for gifted students, full scholarship including meals and transportation. Maria read the letter, her hands shaking slightly. The program would give her children incredible opportunities to develop their talents and interests. There's one more thing, David said. I've spoken with your landlord about the eviction. He's agreed to hold off on the proceedings, and I've arranged to bring your rent current. I can't accept all this, Maria said, though her voice lacked conviction. It's too much. I don't know how I could ever repay you. You don't repay kindness, David said. You pass it on. Someday, when Lucy and Ben are grown and successful, they'll help other families the way I'm helping yours. That's how it works. Just then they heard familiar voices in the hallway. The twins were arriving for their after-school visit, chattering excitedly about something that had happened at school. Lucy and Ben burst into the room, then stopped short when they saw David. They remembered him from the day before, but they still seemed a little shy around him. Hi, Mr. David, Lucy said politely. Are you visiting our mom again? I am. I hope that's okay with you both. Ben nodded seriously. Mom says you want to help our family. That's right. How would you feel about that? The twins looked at each other, having one of those silent conversations that twins sometimes have. Finally, Lucy spoke for both of them. We would like that very much. We've been trying to take care of Mom, but we're just kids. It would be nice to have some help. David felt his heart melt. These children had been carrying such a heavy burden, trying to be strong for their mother while dealing with their own fears and uncertainties. Well, I have some good news then, David said. Your mom has agreed to let me help your family get back on your feet. Maria looked surprised. I did? David winked at her. Sometimes the heart agrees before the head catches up. Over the next hour, David explained his plans to the entire family. He talked about the educational opportunities he wanted to provide for the twins, the job prospects he could arrange for Maria, and the financial security he could offer them all. But there's one condition, David said seriously. Lucy and Ben looked worried until they saw him smiling. You have to promise to work hard in school and continue being kind to each other and to other people. That's easy, Ben said. We already do that. And David added, you have to promise to let me visit sometimes. I don't have any family of my own, and I'd like to be your honorary uncle if that's okay. Lucy clapped her hands together. We'd love that. We've never had an uncle before. As visiting hours ended and the twins prepared to leave with Mrs. Rodriguez, Ben approached David one more time. Uncle David? He said, testing out the new title. Thank you for helping our family. I was scared we wouldn't be able to stay together. David knelt down and put his hands on both children's shoulders. You never have to worry about that again. Your family is going to be just fine. 6 months later, David sat in the audience at Lucy and Ben's school, watching them receive awards for academic excellence. Maria, healthy and strong again, sat beside him beaming with pride. Maria had taken a position as an office manager at a local medical practice, a job that offered good benefits and reasonable hours. The twins were thriving in their advanced classes and had made many new friends. The apartment they had once feared losing had been renovated and was now truly their home. But more importantly, the fear and uncertainty that had once dominated their lives had been replaced with hope and security. After the ceremony, as they walked to David's car, Lucy slipped her hand into his. Uncle David, she said, I want to be like you when I grow up. What do you mean, sweetheart? I want to help families like ours. I want to make sure no kids have to be as scared as we were. David smiled, remembering his mother's words about passing kindness forward. I think you're going to do amazing things, Lucy. Both you and Ben. As they drove home together, David reflected on how much his life had changed since that night he had seen their story on the news. He had gained more than just the satisfaction of helping a family in need. He had gained a family of his own, people who cared about him not because of his money or success, but because of who he was as a person. Sometimes the greatest gifts we give others end up being gifts to ourselves. David had set out to be the twins' guardian angel, but in many ways they had become his guardian angels too, reminding him of what truly mattered in life. The story of the twins who saved their mother's life had become the story of how an unexpected friendship changed 4 lives forever. It was proof that kindness creates ripples that spread far beyond what we can imagine, and that sometimes the most important moments in our lives begin with someone else's crisis. In helping Lucy, Ben and Maria build a better future, David had found his own purpose and discovered that the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the love and connection we share with others.